that it will be able to make you more employable in the market. So it helps you build a career in print media, in radio, television, new media, as well as the allied subjects of mass communication, which could be media marketing, advertising, public relations and corporate communications, event management. This can also help you become an entrepreneur in areas like photography or having your own production house and so on. So I hope that you will be excited to join this program, and we will be waiting to welcome you here in IGNOU.
Hello learners and listeners, welcome to this program. Today's topic is tools and methodologies for gender budgeting. It is very important to know what are the tools to implement gender budgeting initiatives. Many of the countries, they have implemented gender budgeting initiatives. As a student of Masters in Gender and Development Studies, you all must be knowing what is gender budgeting and the various initiatives taken by the governments, like many governments at the international and national level. At the same time, many of the international organizations, they have facilitated the national governments to implement the gender budgeting. In this scenario, we must know that what is expenditure tool, what is revenue tool, how these tools usually used to implement the gender budgeting initiatives. When we use the tools, what is their utility, whether these tools certainly will it help in mainstream the gender issues, and could they national governments, will they able to implement gender budgeting initiatives successfully or not? These are the certain things we are going to discuss in this session. The objective of this session is to describe expenditure and revenue tools, explain the different types of expenditure and revenue tools, and examine the methodology to implement the gender budgeting. These are the three objectives we are going to discuss in this session. As you know, this is part of the course MGSE 002. It is the second year course. We are offering 10 elective courses in the second year. Out of 10 elective courses, the learners who have enrolled in master's program in gender and development studies, they have to choose 8 courses, and this gender auditing and gender budgeting is one of the significant course we are offering in the second year. First, let us start. What are the expenditure tools, and I could able to explain each tool and its significance. If you look at what are the expenditure tool, there are 6 expenditure tools. That is, one is the gender aware policy appraisal. Second one is the gender disaggregated public expenditure incidence analysis. Third tool is that gender disaggregated beneficiary assessment. Fourth one is the gender disaggregated analysis of the impact of the budget on time use. Fifth one is gender aware medium term economic policy framework. Last one is the gender aware budget statement. These are the significant expenditure tool. Let us see one by one. First one is the gender aware policy appraisal. You all must be wondering what is gender aware policy appraisal. Gender aware policy appraisal is the analysis of policies and programs funded through the budget. When we if the policies is based on gender aware approach, then we need to ask in what ways are the policies and the associated resource allocation likely to reduce or increase gender inequality? That is the first question we must ask. Whatever the policies the government implement, first we need to analyze those policies by asking the question whether the existing or implement the policies, the specific policies the government intend to implement or implementing, will it reduce or increase the existing gender equality? That is the first question. So what is that? For example, in same like in South Africa, the land reform program is they have implemented immediately after they gotten independence. For example, in that land reform policy, it has certainly increased the government expenditure. At the same time, the government could able to reform the existing land, and the women could also able to get certain percentage of the land. In that land, due to the good resource allocation by the government, the women could able to access those resources, and they could able to improve the land. That has increased their revenue, and it certainly addressed the nutritional aspects of women and children. That is the one thing. Then women could able to use that land as a resources, and they could able to various entrepreneurial activities. Thus, if you talk about gender aware policy appraisal, we must analyze that particular policy from a gender perspective. Like government budget, like many other economic policies, perceived that, and they could able to think that whatever the policy the government implement, they perceive that it will create a positive impact on both men, women, children, and other genders, everyone in the society. These perceived thing is considered as a gender neutral policy instruments. For example, when we talk about the expenditure and revenue in a specified terms, it is called as financial aggregates. In this financial aggregates, usually what the government thing is that they have a certain financial aggregates, and it could create an impact on certain categories of the population. Okay, so in that financial aggregate, what happened is that most of the time the women and marginalized sections of their population, their name will be mostly absent. It won't be explicitly, they won't refer their name in the government policies. So according to Diana Elson argues that this appearance of gender neutrality is more accurately described as gender blindness. Different revenue raising measures and public expenditure allocations impact women and men differently because of the socially determined roles they play in the economy. Because as you all know that men play a different roles in the society, women they play a different role in the society. So whether as a contributors to economic output and social reproduction, or as beneficiaries of public expenditure and users in the public services. So gender aware policy appraisal is very significant. As you all know, the male and female, they do different roles in the society. According to their roles, their needs also differs. So when the needs are different, certainly the government has to consider each sections of the population of the needs. Accordingly, they have to allocate revenues to address their needs. Second significant tool is the gender disaggregated public expenditure incidence analysis. What is a gender disaggregated public expenditure analysis? Gender disaggregated public expenditure incident analysis estimates the distribution of budget resources among males and females by measuring the unit cost of providing the given service and multiplying that cost by the number of units used by the group. One example I could able to say that in this gender disaggregated public expenditure incident analysis, I could able to give you this Sri Lankan government's food ration and subsidy program in 1980s clearly revealed that despite the rapid economic growth, the real value of food stamps has eroded in the first half of the decade. Then there is a decline in real income of the poor people. Even though the poor, they could able to be part of the food stamp program, girls, women and other marginalized sections of the society, they suffered a lot. Ultimately, the girls and women, their nutritional security has been affected, and there was a higher malnutrition among preschool and school-going children. That's why when you talk about the gender disaggregated public expenditure incident analysis, when we could able to understand that how much public expenditure spent on certain programs and what kind of impact it will create on certain sections of the society, specifically the impact create on the women and marginalized sections of the society. Third important tool as far as expenditure tool is concerned, gender disaggregated beneficiary assessment. If you call gender disaggregated beneficiary assignment, is a means by which the voice of the citizen can be heard. In this exercise, actual and potential beneficiaries of public services are asked to assess how far public spending is meeting their needs. Like for example, if the government has formulated certain policies, will it able to really address the needs? That is the one group. In this gender disaggregated beneficiary assessments, the government could able to use the various methods like opinion polls, attitude survey, group discussion and interview, that they could able to use the various methods to collect the data related to particular program, and based on that they could really able to assess and they could able to come to certain conclusions. The fourth significant tool is that gender disaggregated analysis of the impact of the budget on time use survey. In this particular analysis is the calculation of the link between budget allocation and their effect on how household members spend their time using household time use surveys. Like social reproduction entitles, whatever the social reproduction, certainly it entitles cost. The cost of caring ourselves and caring our children, other dependents, certainly it has a direct expenditure on behalf of dependents such as children, the sick, disabled and elderly. So specifically, the existing studies clearly points out that the women, they spend most of their revenue by taking care of the children, elders and their well-beings. So, like for example, one of the studies clearly pointed out that in 1983 to 85, real per capita expenditure on health fell by 16% in Zambia, because what happened is that in the particular country, the government has closed many of the public hospitals. What happens? The people, they tend to, specifically women and children, they tend to travel more than 16 to 20 kilometers to access the health service. Since they are traveling for long distance, they have to spend a day to access the health services. That has reduced their income, and they have lost the 1 or 2 work days. That's so. When we talk about the sex disaggregated analysis of the impact of the budget on time use, certainly we need to analyze specifically female, how much time they spend on certain kinds of activities, specifically how much time they spend on social reproduction, and how much this like once they spend more time on social reproduction, automatically their time spent on production activities will reduce. That will affect the income of the women. Thus, it is very important to analyze the time spent on each activities by the women and other marginalized groups, that should be recorded. Accordingly, the policies has to be made. The fifth significant tool is that gender-aware medium-term economic policy framework. As far as this policy is concerned, that is gender-aware medium-term economic policy framework, it is used to assess the impact of economic policy on women, focusing on aggregate fiscal, monetary and economic policies designed to promote globalization and reduce poverty. One example I could able to give you as far as gender-aware medium-term economic policy framework is concerned, then our learners could able to understand more. In South Africa, they have invited members of the Women's Budget Initiative to address the workshop on the development of the 1996 medium-term expenditure framework. The idea was to plan expenditure on the 3-year rolling basis rather than on the existing year-by-year rolling basis. When you implement the budget for 3 years, what happened is that it could able to analyze within that 3 years period the government budget initiatives, what it could able to bring changes in the women. That is the first thing. Second one is that National Expenditure Survey produced by the Ministry of Finance in the South African government in 1999 has incorporated more gender analysis. Like in South Africa, other country has implemented gender analysis is the Tanzania, and they have integrated the gender concerns in medium term economic policy framework, and instead of implementing certain policies on a yearly basis, they have implemented certain policies for 3 years term, and within that 3 years period they could able to analyze what kind of impact it could able to bring on women, children and other marginalized sections in the society. The last expenditure tool is that gender aware budget statement. You all know budget is not only it's a revenue and expenditure statement of the government. The budget certainly it talks about the government policies and what in which direction the particular government want to move forward and what type of initiatives they wanted to take for the certain period of time, for like a 5 years period or 3 years period. So budget is a very significant tool. When we talk about the gender aware budget statement, it is the government report that reviews the budget using some of the above tools, like the whatever tools we have discussed so far. The government could able to use those tools and summarize its implications for gender equality with different indicators such as the share of expenditure targeted to gender equality, gender balance in government jobs, contracts or training, or share of public service expenditure used mainly by women. All these things the government could able to use, and they could able to implement or it able to publish the gender aware budget statement. Once they publish the gender aware budget statement, that will explicitly talk about the impacts of the budget on men, women, male, female and other genders. So far we have discussed about the expenditure tools. Now let us discuss about revenue tools. What are the revenue tools? There is a direct and personal income tax, indirect and commodity tax, user fees and other areas. You all know what is direct and personal income tax. Like income tax is typically it's a gender bias instrument. Example, I could able to see that if a woman get married, what happen is that sometimes the couples they jointly file the returns. Maybe sometimes female they experience the tax liability than the male members in the society. Sometimes they could able to file the income tax on in the joint filing of the income tax. In that there may be gender bias also occur. Most of the time asset, savings, property, business, or like a tax expenditures like subsidy, deductions, like exemptions, credits. Most of the time, most of the benefits male spouse may get and female, they may not able to get the benefits. It is important for the government to explicitly publish the details regarding the direct or personal income tax. Other one is the indirect and commodity tax. Most of the time we never realize the impact of indirect or commodity tax on male and female, because the male and female, they perform different roles in the society. Their needs also different. Because of their needs are different, male female, they use the different types of like products for their own survival. Most of the time what happen is that government, they implement gender neutral, they implement the indirect or commodity tax in a gender neutral manner, assuming that whatever the services the government is providing or whatever the tax exemption the government is providing, it may have it may have benefited both male and female, but in reality that is not the true. The products the female they use, sometimes they ended up in paying the more tax rather than the product used by the male members. They may get lots of tax exemption and the cost of that particular product may be low. In this way, it is important for the government to assess what type of roles the male they play in the society, what type of roles the female play in the society. Accordingly, their needs differs. Accordingly, they have to analyze the various commodities. Then the government has to implement tax by collecting the data in a gender disaggregated manner. Another important revenue tool is the user fee. You all must be wondering what is user fees. User fee is basically it is a type of fee paid by the public agencies which is providing different types of services like for example municipalities, they will provide the services like water, and many local government, state government, central government, they provided various services. Like another simple example I could able to quote here is that all of us are traveling and there is a national highways. In that national highways, most of the places we could able to see the tolls collected by the government. In that tolls, what happen is that there are two impacts it will create on female members in the society. Like female also regularly they may or they need to use that particular national highways for their daily they may commute daily and they use that particular road. But when the existing studies clearly point out that the male and female members, they may have a different economic activities compared to male members. The female, they may earn very less, but when it comes to paying the tolls for using the national highways, both irrespective of which gender they belong to, they have to pay the same fee. That is, so it has a differential impact on different genders. Second one is that when we talk about the national highways, roads and other services provided by the government, what happen is that these national highways, it may cross the various small villages and rural areas. In the small village and rural areas, females regularly they have to cross that particular place for taking up certain kinds of economic activities. If the national highways, if they are not designed specific by considering gender into their mind, most of the time the female tend to walk long distance to cross the road, and they may not, the government gender blind manner, they may implement certain policies. So then local people, especially the women in the village, they may not able to use that national highways. Second one is that if they both male and female, if they are forced to pay the same taxes for using certain services, the female members, they may affect more than the male members. That is the another thing. So here, most of the time the government, they used to talk about the efficiency approach, the effectiveness. Efficiency is that to improve the economic activities, most of the time they apply the same taxes irrespective of which gender you belong to. But the studies clearly point out that it has a negative impact on certain sections of the population in the society. That is the last one, is that other areas, maybe this include corporate taxes and other certain taxes due to globalization, the increasing or reduction of custom duties, trade tariffs, debt crisis, all these and physical crisis certainly will have a negative impact on the female rather than male members in the society. These are the revenue tools. As far as methodology is concerned, we need to, when we talk about the gender budgeting, taxes and other issues, certainly we need to talk about the country ownership, participation, transparency, sustainability and continuous improvement. These are the certain methodologies the government, they must use it. First one is that country ownership. In that country ownership, like whichever the country the people they belong to, that they have to formulate the tax structure by looking at the local conditions and looking at the existing economic status of that particular location. They have to formulate the certain taxes, accordingly they have to collect it. Second one is that active participation of the citizens is more important when we talk about the revenue and expenditure tools. The citizens, they could actively participate, analyze the existing budgets, and they can provide certain kinds of suggestions for the government to improve the budgeting process. And third important methodology when we talk about the budgeting process is the transparency. That is very important. Like before preparing the budget, it is important for the government to collect gender disaggregated data that needs to be published, and they need to analyze the status of different sections of the population in the society. Accordingly, they have to prepare the budget. Sustainability is very, very important. And last point with regard to gender budgeting or budgeting process is the continuous improvement. Like the government continuously, they have to analyze the existing budgeting process, and they have to look into the not only macroeconomic policies, it have to analyze the economic policies at micro level, and not only at the national level, they have to analyze the economic activities at the subnational and regional level and local level. Accordingly, they need to they have to integrate those existing status into the budgeting process, and they need to implement the same. Like so far we have discussed about the expenditure revenue tools and methodology to continuously improve the budgeting process for the government to address the women and other gender issues. That's what we have discussed so far. Thank you so much for listening in this session. In coming sessions, we will discuss more about the gender mainstreaming and other issues related to gender budgeting. Thank you.
Dear viewers, the lesson on which I will speak today goes as breeds, varieties and strengths of poultry. While poultry farming, you have to come across of different terms, and particularly you will be interested to know how you will define breeds, varieties and strains. So whether these three are different or three are common. So now I am going to discuss on breeds, varieties and strains one by one, and this lesson will contain so many sub aspects: breeds, varieties and strains of domesticated poultry. What do you mean by domesticated poultry?